Hey guys, Kevin from News Rocky here, bringing you another show from the TV network we call Forward TV down in downtown Norwich here at the studio. Again today we're going to have on a guest. It's a repeat guest, somebody that we enjoy talking to. He is the CEO and co-owner of Citizens Opposed to a Police State. You know, News Rocky, the show itself, we fully endorse and we back the blue. We're pretty open about it, but we're also open about having that conversation because the bottom line at the end of the day, you're never going to resolve the differences we have within our own framework of our society unless we have that conversation. So please stay tuned to News Rocky today. We're going to get in the ring with Dijon, my good friend from the Citizens Opposed to Police State out of Connecticut. Thank you. See you in the ring. Hey, welcome back, and we are so excited to have Dewan on with us today. We're going to be talking a little bit about what's going on with his cause. We'll get updates on some of the issues across the state, including the West Haven incidents that have been taking place down there and his organization, his involvement down there. I'd love to bring on now, if we could please, Dewan Eastman, who is a co-founder, as we said, of the Citizens Opposed to a Police State here in Connecticut. Dewan, how are you today in this snowy Connecticut weather right now? How are you?
Doing well in that there's no other place I'd rather be. I love Connecticut, and even when it's snowing, it to me is one of the best places I've ever been.
Okay, well, hey, you know what? I can't argue that I love Connecticut and New England as well, so we start right off with this conversation agreeing on something. Look at that, we're winning already. So that's the whole thing. So give me an update, Dewan, on your Citizens Opposed to Police State. What's going on with you guys and your cause across the state and your fight with trying to reform, in your opinion, the police departments throughout Connecticut? Give us a little update, please.
Yeah, right now I'm having the odd, I'm doing the odd thing of trying to hurt my own cause or get allowed two activists that wish to quit because West Haven is targeting peaceful protesters from a protest that the mayor's son, if I'm not mistaken, led. And they're targeting them stochastically, and these are activists, even like Los Fidel, who publicly said he no longer wanted to go out and protest. So it's just morally, I still feel obligated if someone came out to protest to make sure that they can quit too. Because once you leave the protesting network or the activist network, you don't have the same resources as you would have. You don't have all of us sitting there trying to tell Los Fidel's story and Nadia Favara's story and how tight the cuffs were on Nadia's arms, where she had the bruises all over her arms, and all of this for a peaceful protest. And this was immediately after the much more violent protest at the Capitol. So I don't think it's equal protection under the law, although I am not a lawyer and law is not something I can speak authoritatively on. But I think that this is a situation that we in Connecticut are better than. And I honestly think that on the conservative side, the liberal side, we can all say, leave these people alone to West Haven PD and just appeal to their decency when, you know, with the facts of the case in front of them and everything else, to just stop charging protesters for peacefully assembling, and maybe make it a little harder for me to do my job a bit. But this is the right thing to do, I think, on this, to appeal to the people of Connecticut to let my friends quit protesting here.
So you have some folks that are walking away from the protest, as you're mentioning. Let's talk a little bit so the listeners understand, the folks that have heard you speak before. And I want to say I appreciate, because, again, this is not a conversation that we probably agree on every level of. I certainly agree that I think there's a need for us to have a conversation across this country. Currently, obviously, we're fighting and battling really with a divide in this country that seems to just keep getting deeper and deeper. We are in Black History Month, and I want to ask you, with your cause and your fight across the state of Connecticut, with your cause that seems to be driving you and many others, how is Black History Month impacting you with your cause and your fight and your energy?
It's good because it's an opportunity to educate. When you understand the world as I do, we believe that our system of education is white supremacist, and that you have to, and that Black History Month is just one time when we get to look at the overall history, which started at 1619 of the United States, which is majoritively me and my ancestors being slaves.
So you believe that this is so? Are you feeling at all? You're four. How old are you again, Dewan?
41.
41. I thought that was around 40. I appreciate it. I didn't want to, and I know I can't insult you with age. You know, I'm 51, so I got 10 years on you, brother. But let me ask you seriously: are things better in this country? You're raising children in this America, and you're raising children in Connecticut. Do you feel like your children are in a better place than you were being raised in with the racial issues?
Oh, by leaps and gobs, even now. But that's why we have to hold Connecticut to such a high standard, because Connecticut does so much better than, in some ways at least, are the ways we're struggling with, than the rest of the United States.
Do you find that when you're out and you're doing your peaceful protest, and we're going to get into some of the peaceful protest and some of those things that not so much from the visual point of view didn't look so peaceful, the West Haven incident that took place, and obviously we have our other friend Kurt who's going through some issues now. We were hoping he would come on with us today from your organization. But what do you think as far as when you go out in the streets and you start to engage people that don't even, maybe they're not there supporting you or your cause, but you happen to stumble upon these folks and you start explaining the cause. Do you get a reaction, positive or negative, from people in Connecticut?
Well, we get all types. I mean, you can't judge, you never can judge a movement off the reactions you get. Sometimes, because we are putting ourselves out there as activists, we get the violent ones. But honestly, there was one really positive interaction I had with some people who were severely on the other side in Glastonbury, where me and one gentleman who vehemently disagreed with the Black Lives Matter movement and cops in general just had a beer right there on the street and talked for a while. And he actually gave me some good motivation. He said, I may not know everything about what to do here, but brother, I need you to get out there and start fixing this stuff. Mm-hmm. And the next time I saw him, he was driving by our protest, waved, and went on home. And that's all I can ask.
So do you think that when you talk about the divide and sort of the energy you're up against, and you certainly probably had a great energy back in March when George Floyd himself was, part of this now history in America that really has exploded the divide and the black struggle that seems to be taking place. Do you think that America itself is inherently just racist, rooted in racism? I mean, I want to set up the question so you can qualify the answer. Each and every day I hear from different parties throughout this conversation. I hear it from political parties. I hear it from the news media. I hear it from motivation of racially motivated folks on all sides. They want to tell me, and this is how it sounds to somebody like me, I want you to help me understand this, that because I'm white, I have to feel guilty about being white and feel almost as if I'm responsible for being a racist when I'm not. How should I react to that?
I'm not exactly sure how you should react to it, but the first question is kind of the important one that kind of is lost sometimes when people. The United States was designed in the eyes of at least people on my side of the left, that when they were being logically consistent anyway, was designed primarily by the founding fathers as an excuse for a racial caste system and slavery that existed all the way up to my parents being adults. And we have vestiges of that.
But do you mean racial when you make
ashamed of your country? It just means that you have to understand that when it's Black Pride time, understand they're going to have some pride too. I mean, I happen to be Irish, and I have Irish pride as well.
So let me ask you that point, though, Jawan.
Honestly, in the United States, our genetics have overcome the race issue many times over. It's just that we need to have our minds overcome the race issue. And that takes honest conversation. And honest conversation means we have to understand the intersections of the different traumas that affect our differing lives, especially when they're so obvious that Russia can exploit them from the other side of the globe.
Now, you touch upon sort of the founding fathers, the forming of this great country, and I do think it's great in its imperfectness because I think eventually we're going to have the greatest country that will never be challenged on earth once we figure it all out together. And so let me ask you, though, you pointed out you're Irish. I also have some Irish heritage. And in the founding fathers, when forming this great country, many races came to this country throughout, European races. Different races were treated differently. We hear this conversation, and typically it's shunned off, especially by those who are really talking about Black Lives Matters only. They don't want to really acknowledge it. Many races have been struggling. There's races throughout this country. There's actually slavery right now in this world that takes place in this modern 2021. How do we get from where we had those conversations maybe last year to where we are now? We went through COVID. What's the next step? How do we fix this, in your opinion? How do we make it work so I don't feel like I'm under attack if I'm being asked, do I support one thing or the other, when I actually support all people? I just don't know how to answer it right because sometimes you're attacked for the wrong response. Help me understand.
Yeah, that is something where we're going to have to basically get people in media. We're going to rebuild our local medias because honestly, our media is extremely divisive and it doesn't do a good job of educating. It does less of a good job of educating than I could do while high with just a few of my friends who happen to be activists. Mm-hmm. It's actually a global shame and has like a 30% approval rating. The media nor Congress ever got an approval rating above Trump during his entire presidency. And I don't think that is an unrelated thing. I think that in order to, that it is a duty towards our form of government that we have an educated population, and because we've been racially backlashing for the past 50 years from my viewpoint, we've destroyed our education system in retaliation. Right now, education and being able to get your hands on information would be what would start us in a golden age.
Do you think misinformation is a problem, though?
Oh, you were saying, sir?
I'm sorry, yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt, but having the conversation with Dewan Eastman, who actually is an activist here in Connecticut, we appreciate taking the time today with News Rocky. Do you think information is maybe the war right now that we're battling? Because misinformation seems to be, and by the way, I'm going to come right out and say it. We're not part of corporate media here on News Rocky. This organization is an independent station moving this thing forward. We hope that we go, we want to go global. We want to be connected to everybody. But the last thing I want to do is be, I don't want to be endowed to anyone that tells us how to say things. And I feel like media is in partnership with politicians today. What's your opinion of that and the impact on the people of this great country?
I think we've become a fearful society because some people have used words in a way that caused a lot of danger. But it's made us fearful of the very things that make us the United States of America. The fact that we can argue controversial ideas and not want to kill each other, not want to hurt each other, and sometimes even have racial discussions where we tolerate, and I know this is controversial to say even on my side,
speak freely.
We tolerate what we know is racism long enough to at least explain why it's racism.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good point. And there is some things in the education of letting people know what's on your thoughts, what's your position versus another person's opinion. One of the things my reflection is, and I want to share this back with you, and I think we can all work on this, is exactly that in reverse. I think the folks that are feeling attacked for, say, being white, attacked for not supporting Black Lives Matters, even though they support the human lives, the fact that people support Back the Blue or men and women who are in uniform over sort of another social issue of the day that you support. We need to find a way to actually stop the arguments. So the arguments are really the obstacles. Let me ask you in regards to law enforcement. What is your position and how do you react and interact with law enforcement on your journey and your cause fighting for justice with the law enforcement agencies across the state?
Well, it depends on the law enforcement officer. I try and treat every officer, every agency, and every municipality very different. At times, if we're being, I was in the Marine Corps, I was military intelligence. I think it's only being honest to say that, yes, at times we will be mildly antagonistic to make a point, or even as antagonistic as I guess is appropriate for civic stuff. You'll say a few cuss words, but you never put your hands up in a cop's face or anything. You know, let them understand and understand the risk that they're taking and the fact that they do have to keep deadly weapons. But we also offer them, I say this jokingly to some extent, but we also offer them chances in the field to constantly work on their skills of de-escalation. And they should thank us for that and maybe even offer us some financial compensation.
Okay, interesting. We'll get to that in a moment. Do you think for perhaps the law enforcement professional of today, unlike the ones that used to walk around, and let's face it, I remember when I was a kid, I'm 51 years old, you know, police in a little small town that I grew up in, they'd rather slap you upside the head and send you home than actually arrest you. I know that's easy to say, and I'm sure the argument could be, well, you were a white boy growing up in a white community, and that's why. Well, I could get into debate and defend the fact that I had black friends, but that's just a passé thing that every white guy tries to do, so I'm not going to go there. My point to this is where did we go wrong as a society where we knew these things were happening, but we couldn't correct them, and we lost the opportunity to connect with people at a very, very vulnerable time in our history of our country? In your opinion, how did we lose it so quickly? I mean, you think about it. It's been going on. It's been suppressed. It's been denied. It's been amplified. 2014, Barack Obama called out the Ferguson issues and the shooting there. It was then later proven that during the investigation, the indictment didn't take place for the officer. Why does media not, when they announce these things or come out and attack people, why don't they come out and say, you know, the evidence proves that there was not a crime committed by law enforcement, and this was actually, unfortunately, a shooting that was necessary to defend life? Do you know why that doesn't happen across this country?
I have an answer, but it would be controversial to your audience.
Say it. Listen, you're here in a friendly place. We're having a friendly conversation. Nothing upsets anybody.
1968, when we started letting Nixon kill the new left and literally use the government to kill it, and started by legalizing marijuana, therefore getting rid of the African American vote and making the largest criminalized population on the planet. If we don't undo that voter suppression, we'll never have the society we deserve. And I think that all of our problems stem from that current form of Jim Crow that we need to get rid of.
So you believe back under Nixon, this kind of it was amplified in a sense, and there was an attack on the African American community, black community, to put people in mass incarceration. We do know that under our current president, President Joe Biden, he himself voted on a very controversial law, mass incarceration. Any thoughts on this new president and maybe his history versus where we go with this president today?
I'm very glad you asked that question. This particular president, we considered the last president racist. That president doesn't have the same body count and from my perspective, would only dream of having the body count that Joseph Biden has and have been given a pass for. It's time. I mean, for once, we have someone in the White House who actually seems like he maybe wants to do good, but also, he's got so much Negro blood on his hands, he can't turn around and say we didn't do it.
So you're saying that I want to clarify, Dewan. Dewan, you're making it, and I found, and this is all just happening here on the News Rocky Show. We're having a conversation, which we'd like to do. You are identifying some of the history of, say, somebody like a Joe Biden and the history of Congress and the Senate that has purposely incarcerated African American males at a high rate. And for example, I worked in corrections for 21 years. I saw generations come in incarcerated for marijuana charges. What a waste of time. What a waste of life. How do we fix that part of it when people are voting on one side of the house just because they get a storyline that they're the ones fighting, but they've been doing it for many, many years and failing each and every time?
Leadership starts by doing, and that's the first laws of power. I think it's the ninth law of power says, win an argument with your actions, not with your deeds. In Connecticut, we're better than this, so let's just show them by doing it here.
Do you get a pushback from the folks that are on your team? And I don't want to try to separate us, but it is a reality for you speaking this way. I mean, you think about it. You've come out and you really called it like it was, and you really said you said your words were that Joe Biden has more Negro blood on his hands than most other presidents. I mean, do you stand by that comment?
I 100% stand by that comment. And
You're going to get beat up by your people, man. You better be careful, Dewan. They're going to come after you.
They come after me all the time, and I just remind them that I bought the LLC, I bought my StreamYard, I paid the bills and could disconnect the lights. The CEO is right here.
Yep.
If you got a problem, bring it to the debate ring or shut the fuck up.
There it is, huh? That's how you do business. I like it. Well, you know what? You're definitely, I'm a fan favorite of you. I don't agree with everything you're doing. I don't agree with the policies that you're fighting against in all aspects. I do think you are doing one thing that I want to give you major credit for. You're inspiring a conversation. And I think one of the great things that Peter Helms was able to do is to connect us and having Kurt on and try to understand. Let's go to West Haven for a minute. That issue that took place this past summer down in West Haven, Connecticut, you showed up a little bit behind the Kurt Erickson, also who was involved down there. Talk a little bit about that for a minute. What's going on in West Haven? There's a lot of press that actually were coming across the wire. Give us an update.
Yeah, that's the thing. I want to, because in the field we've tested the chief. I want to believe he's a good man. But when I go out in the field and when he's not out with his troops, I see a lot of racist behavior. That was one of the reasons why in the video I shared with you, I pointed out that I was kind of picking with them about being ghost skins. Obviously, if you're being accused of being a ghost skin, you're going to be mildly annoyed with it anyway. And so it's not proof by any means. But if there's since Moby Solomein's murder, from our perspective, they would say it was a justified killing. And our protesting of it, it's just that they've been very heavy-handed for no reason, considering the relative peacefulness of our protests.
Do you find that in West Haven right now that this situation has the potential to spiral even further out of control? Or is there any plans to sit down and maybe have a conversation with the chief of police, with some of your organizers in a controlled setting? Could be on Zoom. Actually, I'll throw it out there, and I'll throw it out there. It's not no secret. I kind of threw it your way already. I have sent an email off to the chief of West Haven, inviting him to participate in a Zoom meeting or a meeting in general, if COVID allows, where we can actually have a sit down and see if we can resolve some of these claims and understand what the police are doing down there.
Honestly, it seems like it's the Connecticut way for us to have a sit down and actually do that, and that would probably solve a lot more.
Well, you're saying your organization 100% is in favor. If we can help facilitate that, you will participate in that sit down?
100%. My assistant is already prepping me.
Very good. Awesome. So the News Rocky is going to continue to work with trying to communicate with the West Haven Police Department, trying to verify that what we're trying to do down there actually with them is try to sit down and help just mediate the situation. Because one of the things I find in Connecticut is a lot of the arguments we have, a lot of them are really based on a lot of, maybe someone didn't understand. They weren't in that position at that time. Maybe they were in the position but weren't in the place or location when something takes place. Third-hand information seems to spiral out of control. But the one difference I want to get into with you right now, Dewan, is your phone. These things have changed the world we live in. You can videotape, audio, anybody that you deal with. Tell me how powerful that tool is out of your tool chest. I have to assume your phone is the most powerful. Is that correct?
My phone, of course, the body cameras, the drones, and anybody wishing to donate to help us get more, please look me up on Facebook.
I'll give you a chance to announce. We'll do that at the end, too. So we'll get folks to direct them over to you if they want to help support your cause. So talk a little bit about those cameras that you use. Do you find it different when you deal with law enforcement that is wearing a camera? Most law enforcement agencies are doing it now. Do you find them interacting with you in particular or your cause and the people in your cause differently when you have cameras on?
They do, but there's also I deal with the entire state of Connecticut, so every place is different. Like in Hartford, for instance, we shut down the streets all the time, and the cops have just accepted it as as this is what we do, and we kind of work together in a sense. It's not the same in West Haven, which is why it's one of those places I have to put a lot of extra focus on. Really, it's more like the squeaky wheel gets grease for me. Mm-hmm. So the squeaky, and you a lot of times don't see a lot of the good, but I think by nature of what a protest is when it's peaceful, we do force the conversation.
So tell me a little bit about this. When you watch media and the national corporate media portraying things, typically you won't see what I'm going to bring up as a conversation and topic unless you go onto Fox News or one of the more conservative sites. And there's a suppression, it seems, to some of this activity. We have seen people being dragged out of vehicles in these very protests you talk about, where you're locking down streets to get your point across to be heard. What is your opinion of actually that kind of violent behavior that takes place? And we do see it. We do see it. So what's your opinion of that? And how do you control that as someone in a leadership role like yourself?
Well, obviously, I have no control over law enforcement other than what things I can do to make their jobs a lot harder. But as a society, I think that that leaders in protest movements also have to learn to be diplomats, to remind the country that is extremely ignorant of its own history, that its history is still going on.
Let me ask you this, Dewan. You touched on that. Have you seen some of the more horrific experiences? We saw some of these protests go really ugly fast. Have you seen some of those happen across this country?
Yes, the one where Bella was attacked by the officers. The officer literally, first they arrested a random black guy who was just eating his meal as a way to distract us, knowing that the protesters would instantly try and shield the black guy. And because the young lady Bella was, I guess the officer didn't like the way she was talking, he literally took a overhand right, stepped in and hit her with it. And then they arrested her for assaulting an officer, but they let her go immediately afterwards. This was in Stamford, Connecticut, and I have the video. I can even put it up again if they need it.
So you've seen that side of it. Have you also seen, either through video or personally, where you see the opposite, where protesters are actually, say, attacking drivers or people that are driving by? Or we see sometimes, unfortunately, the worst case scenario is when just somebody's trying to get from work to home, they're held up in this kind of peaceful protest, and sometimes violence takes place. You've seen this happening, correct?
Not at any of my protests,
okay.
But nobody would do that with me going around, because then they'd have to deal with me.
Right. So you're taking control, and you did make a good point. And I want to back you up on something you made, because it's going to help me solidify my point. Is you really don't have control of this population of people, this group of people. There's energy out there that goes on. I think you would probably agree then, and I'm going to get a little political with you for a moment, but we now have an impeachment process going on with this very president. He did call for people to come upon the Congress or to the Capitol and be heard, and in his total speech be peaceful protesting. People are charging him right now with inciting this riot, so to speak, and all the fancy political words they want to use. But isn't it a little unfair? He had no control of that, just like you just said about how you wouldn't be able to control your own population.
I think the presidency is a completely different thing, in that even in my protest, if I were to get up and say, hey, we're going to storm the Capitol, I would want me to be knocked out, so that no one would do that, because I understand that people are trusting my leadership skills and stuff. So the president being the ultimate leader, it's a very different thing. But I also think that Donald Trump broke the law on emoluments clauses and working with foreign governments, all that stuff. It's good that they feel that they got the balls to impeach him now. But honestly, if you were cowards for 4 years, we don't need the distraction. We're busy.
Do you think this impeachment is just about noise and try to preoccupy? I mean, we're just kind of we'll wrap that up and get back to the Connecticut issues.
It's performative. It's like, okay, you impeached him after he was president. Ooh, so
right.
What?
Right. So moving on, what's next for you and your cause here in Connecticut? We're coming out of this winter snow is here. Soon it will be March, April, certainly right into June in the summer. What's the plans? What is your goal here? What is your objective legislatively? Do you have any movement going on? Are you connecting to legislators trying to help you with your cause?
We are connected to legislators through BLM 860. Working on a initiative called the Make Racism a Public Health Emergency with the president of BLM 860, Michael Aratati, leading that initiative. very strongly across the state, and we're of course right behind him, protesting and offering security by veterans to make sure that those to make sure that those protests are like the protests I love to see, peaceful, with a little bit of argumentation, but no one ever gets hurt.
So I'm here in the studio, Dewan, and we're in the city of Norwich. They all make fun of me because I say Norwich funny, Peter and all the guys, right? So, but Norwich is really well known for a lot of things. The Rose City, small little town, little port city, very much involved in the turn of the century with as far as a lot of material being made here, a lot of jobs and industrial, right? Jobs are no longer here. It's pretty much a city that sits kind of vacant in a lot of ways, very much like many cities in Connecticut. But one thing that I witnessed here, and we're actually helping get the word out about this, is the city of Norwich. It's mayor, who happens to be Republican, with a council that's all Democrat majority. He also has the police department here, and the Black Lives Matters movement and the movement in general to have these organized events over the past year in 2020, they went off without a hitch. In fact, they went off to the point where the actual organizers asked those agitators, so to speak, to leave town because they didn't want to have problems here. It's almost a model example of being heard, but also being in control of their own community. How do you help with communities that are destroying themselves? We see places like Seattle, Washington. We see places, even in Connecticut, some destruction has taken place. Some of the folks, I was listening on Saturday, and some of the folks were bragging about them putting ketchup or paint on different statues. And we'll get into that. But how do you justify the destroying of property during these events?
I understand the destroying of property because under the former administration, we brought out military troops and we made peaceful protests impossible. Once you make peaceful protests impossible, you get violence. And I understand it's my job, my duty to my country to an extent to make sure that we have peaceful protests.
So you think this is your First Amendment right in a sense of you flexing it in this arena. But let me ask you in general, you talk about, this peaceful piece. But is it not true that there is a lot of energy? We're seeing Seattle. What is your feelings about organizations? You talked about Black Lives Matters, 860, your organization. But what about Antifa? What do you think they're doing for your cause?
It's a split. I mean, the thing is, Antifa has such a huge, not even technically, I'm Antifa and I support the freedom of Puerto Rico, but there are so many differing factors under the I'm anti-fascist that it's hard to take responsibility for any of them. So the only thing I could give is like a blanket statement that once you're talking about violence as a way to make change and are even really any massive destruction of property that isn't like there, it has no real, it's helping the country move forward, then you need to sit down.
Do you think, in your opinion, Dewan, do you think that this country is heading towards a civil war?
No.
Do you think we can avoid it?
Yeah. I think.
Explain why, because there's a lot of people speculating, 74 million people that voted for Donald Trump, 74 million people that are, saying on one side, I'm not angry enough to want to have a riot. I'm not angry enough to want to fight physically. I am disappointed enough to try to fix this broken system. Term limits. I think there's things we could throw out there on the table we all agree on. But how do we fix the problem, Dewan? How do you make sure, the citizens opposed to the police state, that's your organization, but you also belong with other causes. How do we get to this table actually and stop the nonsense of yelling at each other? And I'm not saying you're doing that, but some out there do. How do we get it fixed, man? What do we need to do? How do I make sure on my side, I can bring the right people to the table and you can bring the right people to the table and we can have a conversation?
Well, the first thing we have to do for the conversation is to speak in honesty. And a lot of times it's embarrassing when you're an African American who generally, just by the numbers, isn't allowed to or has a harder time getting quality education or something, to be told by the white population that gets that higher education and stuff that they can't learn, that they can only learn a little bit of a month of Black history, and then they can't even do the math for how this stuff is still going on. Mm-hmm. We have to be honest to some extent. And I do think that there is a type of politics where we've weaponized lying that is a bit separate, though, from what the people want. I think as we democratize our economy in a little bit more, especially in the state of Connecticut, where I think we could actually lead on this because we're more inclined to do it, where the racial, I guess, coal isn't as hot as it is in some other places in the country. We have such a good opportunity. This shows to make Connecticut a model for the United States. And I honestly think our boring ass governor, Lamont, just doesn't have the balls to do it, and it's just an opportunity being missed. If I were to tell the just straight up truth, I think that fighting civil rights is in Connecticut, we can get a lot further.
Well, you do know Connecticut has a rich history in fighting civil rights, fighting for civil rights. In fact, Connecticut itself was the first state in the country in the Union, and I think it was around 1936, to establish a Fair Housing Trade Act. And that Fair Housing Act actually was established here in Connecticut before the actual feds even established it. And that was during Mitt Romney's father's days when he was serving the federal government. You know, it's interesting when you talk about Connecticut, these diversities, these issues. When you look at the votes that turn out for each election in Connecticut, you see about 7 different locations that are Democratic strong. The rest of the small populated towns, majority Caucasian, white, other, not as many heavily black and or Hispanic or Latino populations seem to vote one way versus the other. How do we bring those conversations together, Dewan? That's an important part, because there's a divide right now for people who think like, hey, I'm paying my taxes for somebody that's in the city who doesn't appreciate me. Why am I paying for it? How do we fix that?
Well, first, the political party that's supposed to represent the majority of the people, the Democratic Party, has to actually do its fucking job and stop coming in saying that it's only going to do half of its job and do this moderate stuff. It has to embrace what it calls its left flank, what the rest of the world calls a modern industrialized economy that happens to be mixed between socialist and capitalist, which honestly for any of us is how this Cold War thing should have ended anyway. We don't need to learn the mistake the Soviet Union, but the mistake of extremes that the Soviet Union made, even though that did bring me my wife here, and collapse. We can just simply step in, go to the end of the book that's rather obvious, go back to remember our history, go back to a New Deal formula, and instead of bringing back the jobs that were here, bring jobs that enrich communities so that we're not so endangered that Russia can come in, set up a news station, and make us look like a bunch of jackasses.
Well, it's an interesting point, and we're winding down here. Dewan, I want to say thank you again. You're always welcome on the show. We can talk about any cause. We can disagree. I can tell you that I am going to keep communicating with you and your organization. We're going to reach out to the West Haven Police Department. We're going to try to organize that sit down. I think this is a perfect scenario for the News Rocky show. It's, do a little documentary if everyone's willing, because you know what? This is the message, like you've said several times. Connecticut has a chance. Connecticut can be a leader here. We can disagree, but we can also agree on one thing. We want to fix it. And if we all are committed to fixing it, I think we can actually sit in that room and do that. Dewan, why don't you mention to the listeners of News Rocky where they can find you, support you, and as you said, if you need a new computer, maybe you can let them know how they can donate the money or whatever to your cause. Go ahead. There you go.
Okay, it's just became a good idea. That's a great idea there. For donations, there will be a GoFundMe set up for it. My assistant will set it up as soon as she sees the show. And also, I would like for you to just friend me on my Facebook, because honestly, we use our Facebook to communicate when we have protests. And I believe that meeting people face to face is the most powerful form of healing that we can have.
Perfectly put. And so, Dewan, I just want to say thank you to you again for coming on the show today, where I'm going to make my closing remarks. I'll say thank you to you, and we certainly will keep communicating. I'm sure we will, and we look forward to actually someday after this COVID mess to actually sit together in the studio, not be doing the Zoom meetings that we've been doing. So you have a blessed day. We'll reach out to you soon. Thank you for coming on to the News Rocky Show. Dewan Eastman, the owner and founder of the Citizens Opposed to Police State. Thank you. And so there you go, guys. This is the News Rocky. We just had a really good episode. I think it was a follow-up episode to the original when Dewan Eastman was on with us. This citizens opposed to the police state, not something that I totally wrap my head around. But the one thing I will tell you, I learned this from my time serving in the Department of Corrections in the state of Connecticut. You cannot argue your way out of this. You cannot debate your way out of it. You actually can't even have protest your way out of this. You cannot have laws that are going to get yourself out of this. This is all about a conversation. And if we're not willing as a people to sit down across the aisle and understand why someone feels the way they feel, even if you don't agree with how they feel, if you don't agree with the topic at hand, if you don't agree with the facts that they're presenting, you still need to be committed to wanting to resolve the issue. You see, we as a people, we need to fix the broken. We need to fix the broken system. We need to fix the broken world that we live in. The world that we live in today is breaking even further. We're finding ourselves fighting amongst family members, fighting against loved ones, fighting against our neighbors. Because of what? Because of topics that are brought to us from a corporate media. I want to tell you that I think, quite honestly, I'm going to blame one party in this entire scenario. Corporate media has played us for fools for many, many years. They have attempted to divide us. And I will tell you, through this energy, this is what's going to happen. People like myself who are conservative, right-wing, known as a right-wing sort of not cuckoo, but a realist, someone that also understands that we cannot solve this problem without communicating with the opposite side. Someone like DeJuan is willing to come on the show and talk about his perspective. Someone who's a leader in his area of expertise, going out and organizing. I'm not an organizer, nor would I support that, but I support the rights of the First Amendment. Unfortunately, in this country, the First Amendment's under attack, but only for those who seem to be against certain policies, certain corporate media policies, particularly that have to do with a Democratic-run Congress and Senate, and now a president in Washington, D.C. We see this across the board, the cancel culture. We didn't get into it today with DeJuan, but we will down the road. Think about it, folks. There is an attempt here to cancel out all the history of this country. Even in its worst day, we should still remember why it was the worst day. I don't think anyone should advocate to cancel out every piece of it. We'll talk with him. This organization is definitely out there. They're active. We are going to work on the meeting, hopefully this sit-down that could take place in West Haven. We can sit down with the chief if he's willing to. We are sending messages constantly out to his administration. You are more than welcome to come on this show, Chief, and talk about your position. We are a Back the Blue partner with Southeastern Connecticut Back the Blue. I am a law enforcement supporter, true blue all day long, and I love law enforcement. I know 99.9% of us that have served or do serve now, we do it for the right reasons. I do know one thing, though. It is our obligation, even as we don't serve today, to make sure that we can help fix the problem. So if you're willing to do that, keep tuning into News Rocky, keep helping us spread the word, and keep being involved in your community. Go out and talk to somebody. Don't talk to them because you want to have an argument. Talk to them even if you disagree about how you can resolve the issue at hand. Thank you for tuning into News Rocky today. It's a pleasure. Monday through Friday, we come to you live from downtown Norwich right here at the Forward TV station. Again, guys, we're launching this whole thing on March 1st. The big announcement came out last week. You'll be seeing where we'll have an app. You'll be able to go onto that, Spotify, YouTube, find us on social media platforms alike. And not only the News Rocky Show, many other shows here. We have Do Not Sports. We have the Hustle Report. We have a whole bunch of other shows that are coming out and being broadcast out of this network. I am just so happy to be a part of it. And I'm so happy we have guests like DeJuan Eastman who come on and have a conversation that we don't have to agree with, but at least we respect each other. Thanks for tuning in to News Rocky. I'll see you tomorrow in the ring at 4 p.m.